Hello and welcome back to Shanti Finance. Today's video is about watercolor and I am going to discuss different kinds of paper to use with watercolor, and I'm also going to talk about different kinds of paper not to use with watercolors. So it is going to be a very comprehensive guide for papers to use with watercolors. Let's start with what not to use. What not to use is your regular sketchbook paper or printer paper. I will explain why not. Let's take a closer look first. If you see closely, it says that it is meant for dry media. So that is what this paper is for, and also it is only 50 pounds, so pretty lightweight. So let me show you what happens when you use this paper. So if you keep on wetting the paper and keep the paper wet for a very long time, not only that it buckles up, but it does not absorb any paper, so water stays on the surface, and then eventually if you use too much water, then it will buckle up completely, and I don't know if you can see the texture on this corner. Not only that it will buckle up completely like it is doing over here, it will also eventually tear off because it is not meant for wet media. So this is something that is definitely not recommended and definitely not work with watercolors. Next up is your machine-made, heavily textured watercolor pads. These are cheaper store brands. Now, do not get me wrong, I am not a snob for art materials. Not that I do not like cheaper art materials just because they are inexpensive. I would love it if they would work. What happens is that if you watch a little bit closely, I don't know if it is visible or not, there's just way too much texture on it, which also would have been fine for some kind of textured work. What happens is that when you wet the surface of this paper, constantly the water keeps getting absorbed no matter how much water you keep putting. So when you actually apply paint, it does not spread out or does not blend as well as it should on a watercolor pad or watercolor paper, and eventually it gives you a streaky looking watercolor, which is definitely not what you want with your watercolors. So I will not recommend this kind of paper, although if you look at these works that I have created on this particular paper, the heavy texture is not looking too bad. So if this is what you like to work with, that is fine, but I think you have to fight a lot with for blending and moving the paint over the surface of the paper. So if that is okay with you, please go ahead and use this paper. Otherwise, I do not recommend these papers at all for watercolor. Next up is Strathmore cold press watercolor paper. They are 140 pounds in weight, and this is the cold press one, so it has got some texture on it. By far, this is one of my most favorite kind of paper to work with. I have only worked with Strathmore cold press watercolor paper, so I cannot talk about other brands that have cold press paper, but this works wonderfully. The paper does have a little bit texture, but that does not block any kind of blending or any technique that you would like to do with watercolors. Let me show you a few examples of artworks that I have created using this particular brand and the type of paper. They're heavyweight, so they take a lot of water and paint, and because of the very nice absorption, they stay wet for a long time, which gives you lots of room for blending and perfecting your artwork the way you should. They're very white, very archival, so extremely good if you are thinking of creating art for selling or longevity. So definitely something I would recommend for fine art work with watercolors. Last up is the Fabriano hot press watercolor paper. Now this is also 140 pounds, so this is also pretty heavyweight. For watercolors, I recommend nothing less than 80 pounds. Even 80 pounds I wouldn't recommend. Nothing less than 100 pounds would probably be better. If you do not like textured surfaces, this, because it is hot press, it's like an extremely smooth surface, almost like your vellum paper, and has extremely good absorption. So blending and any kind of watercolor techniques works wonderfully on it. This is one of the recent works that I have created with on this paper, and this is one of the older works on this paper. They work wonderfully for watercolor paper. So this is one of my one of the couple of choices that I recommend for watercolor paper. Now, no matter what kind of paper you finally choose to work with watercolor, one of the recommendations that I would like to make is that always tape around your paper. And not only that, it gives you a nice sharp edge or border around your artwork, but when you tape your paper on the surface of your board where you are working, then your paper does not move, and that is something I really like. And even more importantly, what happens is that no matter how good quality watercolor paper you are using, when you put water and a lot of water on the surface of the paper, the color paper tends to buckle up. Now, if you tape it on the board or whatever surface you're putting the paper on, then what will happen is that it will buckle, but once the water dries, once the paint dries, it will dry back flat and smooth. It will not have the buckling that was happening during the process of painting. So this is one very important tip. So that's all about watercolor paper. I hope you find this video useful. I hope you found all the information very useful and would put it to good use. So give me a like if you like the information, and do not forget to subscribe. Also hit the bell when you're subscribing so that you get a notification whenever I post videos, which is every Wednesday and Friday in the evening EST hours. So keep tuned for more and more video tutorials, art vlogs, and everything under the sun related to art. Thank you for